areas of excellence for each of the carriers. I don't know, maybe the next time we see this report, will it be different? We can kind of look at some of those things. All right, what do you guys think? Is that a good lineup?
Sounds good to me.
Do it. Let's do it.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit you guys with the screen share. So whenever you do pop into the live stream, you know exactly what we were discussing. So the first story we'll do is the Cox Mobile story. And actually, I caught wind of this from Carlos, who was at CES this week. And this is exactly what he told me. So the story that Jeff Baumgartner put together and put on light reading, obviously he must have been listening to the same people talking from Cox Mobile. Whatever. Cox had a kiosk or a what do they call those? Table or whatever, and they were inviting folks to kind of see what they had to say. So the article was on light reading. Cox Mobile looks to ramp volume in 2024. All right, so Cox is preparing to beef up its promotion and marketing at the Cox Mobile service. This is year 2 of their, foray into mobility services. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a story a couple years ago in which Cox actually had a deal with Sprint. And then, of course, Sprint consumed by T-Mobile means that Cox had a deal with T-Mobile. Well, Cox backed out of that deal and wanted to go with Verizon. I'm assuming it was because of pricing. I mean, a larger network as well, but in most of the markets where I think Cox is, they're not small rural markets. So I think it more so had to do with the wholesale deal. I think Verizon was giving them a better price, and there was a little bit of a court battle. T-Mobile and the contract with Sprint that was there pre-existing and stuff like that. But anyways, they worked through all that. They ended up getting away from the T-Mobile component and then just going with Verizon. And for them, it's just been about scaling. In the markets where they offer wireline service, they want to get people bundled. They're basically Cable Junior, with respect to the size and scale of Comcast and Xfinity, Charter and Spectrum. So they're not big like that. They don't have those kind of markets. Therefore, I don't think they're going to see the type of growth in mobility service. But according to Cox, they say they want to ramp up volume. They did a soft launch of some markets where they started selling Cox Mobile across their footprint. Cox is trying to encourage people to take their higher tier wireline plans, and I think in the process, start selling Galaxies and iPhones on a promotional rate that can attract customers to their mobile service too. Now, one of the executives says, quote, "Operationally, we are super strong." I don't believe that. I don't actually think operationally Cox is strong at anything. To me, they're really old-fashioned telco. I don't think they've evolved and adapted well for the new industry. I think a lot of their customers left for fixed wireless. They don't trade publicly, so we don't get their numbers. And I fear that if we did get their numbers, it would show heavy losses to both Verizon and T-Mobile 5G home internet. So they're likely trying to curb some of the losses somehow, some way by offering that converged bundle. They're also exploring the possibility of skinny retail, small pop-up kiosks at certain venues. I don't know, possibly maybe like malls or something. I don't know what their plan would be there, but look, I know we've heard Spectrum talk about CBRS offload, and Cox has some of those licenses, but Comcast has completely just walked away from building a network, right? They basically sold their low band, the 600 megahertz, to T-Mobile. I'm not even sure about this part. I get they have access to the infrastructure and they're already up on the utility poles. They're up there with the power lines and all those things, but they're piloting all this stuff in major markets where they exist, like in Vegas. And I've already heard of Cox testing fixed wireless access for themselves and using CBRS for offloading to get people off of Verizon gigs of usage. and I don't know what the time frame is. I don't know what I don't even know if they have a radio gear contract with anybody like Nokia or Samsung or Ericsson or whomever. I don't know any of those details. And because again, this company is not publicly traded, we don't get much transparency. So they can say they're going to ramp volume in 2024. They could say a lot of things, Wi-Fi hotspots and CBRS building, and adding mobility lines and all that. I just don't believe that a future in telco exists where Cox continues to be viable. I think fixed wireless access continues to crush them. And, when I look at what fiber has done here in the Cleveland market, they have put the pressure on Cox. So between fixed wireless access and fiber options, I just don't believe in a future with Cox showing any type of strength or growth. I just don't. Let me get you in on this.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no experience with Cox as a company, but from what I can tell from testimonials from, you and other people, seems like their reputation isn't exactly the best. So, I don't see this making a big impact in the the draw to fixed wireless, if that makes sense. A lot of their customers are so fed up with them as a company that even if you were to offer some sort of bundle or discounted service for wireless, I don't see it making much of an impact for them because their reputation is so poor. So, nothing burger for me in this one.
B.
Well, I don't care. They're doing what they got to do. They're just like big cable in that they don't have very many levers to pull. Sneed, I mean, fixed wireless access is a definite threat to everybody that's doing coax. That traditional big cable type of operation. And it's going to continue to be for the foreseeable future. The only thing they can do is hang on to the coattails of the Verizon network for dear life, and that's pretty much what's happening right now. They don't have a play. I mean, they can upgrade their networks in order to serve their customer, better from a fiber to the prim standpoint, and that would help. But it's not going to stop all the bleeding. Um, so the biggest hope that they have is a converged bundle offering with wireless. Um, pitching themselves to the coattails of the Verizon network. It is what it is.
Hey, big shout out to Justin. Thank you. First super chat of the evening, broken the seal. He said, thoughts on Mobile X versus Visible. All right, now if I'm pinning those two brands together and what they offer in terms of services, when I think about Mobile X, I think of a service in terms of their plan construction that's designed to help you save money. But they do so in a way that isn't the traditional unlimited plan, right? So if you're say you use less than 10 gigs a month in data, you're very frequently on Wi-Fi, home, work, whatever. It makes a lot of sense to try to save some ducats with Mobile X, right? A bill that, could keep you even possibly cheaper than Visible. Now, the entry level Visible plan is a totally different story. What I mean by that is the entry level Visible plan when it's on sale is like $20 or $25. The Visible Plus plan, which is a more premium plan, sells for 45, right? And then when it's on sale, it's like 35. That to me is a huge value for a high capacity. I'd call it like a premium unlimited plan experience. So it really depends on your plan. So if I'm a power user, true unlimited data, I'm probably leaning towards Visible, right? Because again, Mobile X, Visible, both on the Verizon network. So you're not arguing networks. It's really about usage patterns. High data usage, power user, you go with Visible Plus, right? Trying to save some ducats, but you like the Visible layout, go with the regular Visible plan. If you can keep your usage low and you can count your gigs on two hands, Mobile X can save you money. That's kind of the way I look at it. All right. So, and the unlimited hotspot option from Visible could be, a game changer for some people because they do a lot with tablets or they're work laptops or something like that. That might be meaningful to you. I don't know. But thanks for the super chat, bud, and hopefully that gives you something to think about. What up, Moose? Got a Moose sighting, ladies and
Oh
gentlemen.
man, let me just say, Cowboys, man, they failed me once again. What a terrible. I also expected though.
Sucks to suck.
You
Packers
expected
got Mike
them to
McCarthy
get,
fired twice.
you expected them to
Sad.
get dusted up by the Packers, bro?
Bro, how many years have we been saying the same thing on this podcast? Literally, same freaking story every year.
Every year, bro.
It is what it is.
How about this story, Moose? Can Dish
Oh yeah,
raise more cash? What do you think about this one?
yeah. We talked about this one. It's going to be interesting. You know, some of their debt. Sorry. Some of their spectrum is, debt companies own that spectrum now because they basically were like, here, I'm going to give you this in collateral for what I need. This is so crazy, dude. But, 2025 Q4 is literally the last quarter they have with cash.
There's two schools of thought. With the spectrum repositioning and I guess some of the layoffs, they've made some movements that give them some flexibility financially. Here's some commentary from financial analysts at debt research firm Credit Sites and Covenant Review. Quote, "We think much of the trust in Charlie Ergen has been lost." All right. Moose, do you agree with that?
I mean, what trust did they have in the past?
I don't know. I didn't have any.
God. I mean,
I didn't
want to
have
hear.
any,
Okay,
but
so what do you guys think about this? Because I have my own. I want to save it to the last, but I really want to know what you guys think about this.
I didn't have any trust in Charlie from day one. I mean, it's only gotten worse with time. He's basically had to resort to some pretty extreme things. Merge with his own companies, right, to try to create financial flexibility. This other quote from New Street Research, quote, "We believe Dish could raise more spectrum-backed debt at reasonable yields now, maybe because of the rates dropping over the next several months." B, jump in.
No, they can't.
You disagree with the statement?
I mean, I'm just answering the question of the article. Can they raise
Mhm.
more funds? The answer is no. I mean, I don't see a pathway forward for that company. I really don't. And it's very unfortunate. I feel for the employees and everything there. I'm sure they're doing the best that they can, but they just don't have the assets. They don't have the assets. They never did. It was always going to be a shadow company that was thrown together in order to allow regulators to push the T-Mobile merger through. It never should have been allowed to happen. It was a bad idea on the part of the government for allowing it to happen. They're going to have egg on their face because we're going to end up with 3 MNOs going forward. I mean, I don't see. I mean, unless something changes, how is this going to continue to operate? They don't have the cash flow. They don't have the customer base. Which is what it is.
According to Ergen, one thing is clear about where Dish will be getting funding. Quote, "We don't think that selling the spectrum is the right answer. A lot of people have speculated that they should sell some assets, which their assets is their spectrum. They have 600 megahertz frequencies, or 600 and 700 for the low band. The 600 is more like their national play. The 700 situational in some markets. They are going to buy the 800 megahertz from T-Mobile at some point. Now, if they can raise some capital, they could do that, right? Potentially with this move. They have AWS in a few different forms. They've got the 1700, 2100, and I think they've got it in blocks H, AWS 3 and AWS 4. They also have some DoD. They have some CBRS. They own some millimeter wave. They also have some frequencies through satellite, right? Some millimeter wave stuff. So I don't know. They do. It's an accurate statement. It is accurate to say they have assets in spectrum, but if they're putting debt on those assets, that means somebody can take it from them if they can't meet the financial responsibilities of it. Isn't that right, Moose?
Yep. And by the way, their bond is worthless right now, right? So, I mean, basically, if you buy into that bond, it's worse than a penny stock, you know?
There's people that are heavily invested in Dish, bro, waiting for this thing to turn into something. Is this thing going to turn into a prince or is it going to stay a frog, EM?
You know the answer to that. Staying a frog, dude. They're gonna get sold off and scrapped to the highest bidder.
Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess now it's more about time frame, don't you think?
Yeah, like I want to be positive when we talk about Dish, but it's really getting hard to.
But every week there's a story about some kind of move. Like it's always this like some development twist and turn to the Dish story. They there's always life. Like we report something negative, something bad, like major setback, and then Charlie pulls a rabbit out of the hat and does something else to keep him viable for another 6 months, year, 2 years. Like this now pushes Dish's survivability through 2025. People were speculating that they were going to run out of money at the end of 24. Moose, you were one of them. So now
It
this
still
gives them
could
an
happen.
additional year on your time frame, right?
It still could happen, right?
No, I'm just talking about the time frame. I'm not saying that
Right.
it's going to be a different outcome. I'm just saying
Right.
it buys them more time, right?
Right. But I think the biggest thing, and I have very strong opinions about Dish. Um, I honestly feel like they're wasting all of our time. You know, they somehow are being forced to become this fourth carrier. The only thing that I think hasn't been triggered is a bailout directly from the government.
You think that's a possibility?
It's definitely possible.
Mm.
They better not.
I mean,
It's going to have to come from the DOJ, though. It's not going to come from the FCC. It can't. And it's not going to be funded by the other carriers. And you know T-Mobile doesn't want any parts of that, bro. Why would they want to keep them alive longer? I mean, they've had their freaking knee on their neck for 3.5 years.
well, I'm telling you, it's going to either come down to a bailout or you're going to have a very interesting situation where you're going to have to sell off these assets.
Then sell them off. Sell them off.
Right.
Then I mean,
right. But who wants to buy them? See, the thing is that they're going to have to go for like 90% reduction.
Yeah, somebody will buy it.
Oh, I can tell you this. I'm pretty sure everybody's going to want a piece of it, but not all of it.
Yeah. Because all the spectrum that they have isn't necessarily cream of the crop type spectrum. I mean, I'm sure T-Mobile is going to want some of that 600, max, low band. Maybe Verizon will get some of the 700. I mean, but Verizon's got the C block of 700, I believe, and it's contiguous across the country, whereas Dish has it only in certain areas. I'm not even sure if it's the C block. I'm not sure. So I mean,
it's
they have N29, that supplemental
it's
downlink.
the stuff that AT&T has.
Supplemental down, so it's not going to be downlink and uplink.
Not paired, no.
Oh Jesus! So it's like it's like CBRS grade 700. I mean, I don't know, man. I just
and I'm pretty sure it's only 6 megahertz too. It's really not that much.
Oh Jesus! Come on. I mean,
part of that's probably guard band too.
Yeah, it does butt up against what Verizon holds in 700, but then they would have to get band 13 like rebanded and everything, and I don't think that's even on the table. So
yeah, it's not even worth the cost if they have to do all of that. I mean, I don't know, man. This is in trouble, and they have been in for a long time. And again, I'm going to be that guy. I've been very consistent on this topic. I'm going to blame the government. I'm going to blame T-Mobile. Like T-Mobile never intended for Dish to be successful. They only wanted Dish to become a fourth carrier so that the merger could go through. And they've proven that with their actions, not necessarily their words, but definitely with their actions. They have done everything possible to obstruct Dish's ability to compete. And here we are. They've been able to get away with murder for such a long time. And I'm just baffled. It is what it is. I'm baffled.
Super chat from Southwest Ohio speed testing. Big salute to you. Thank you, man. Dish has one good thing, and that's the free iPhone and Galaxy with no trade-in on Infinite. I agree. That's a great promotion. Consumer friendly, but definitely profits ain't there. It should be spiking their net ads, but we haven't really seen that manifest itself throughout the year. We'll see what the Q4 numbers show. I don't think they'll be great. But he also said that he has more faith in US Cellular than Dish. They do nothing right.
US Cellular's on the chopping block too.
Yeah, but it's a USL ain't much better. I mean, the only
I think he's
company,
making a statement though, saying how dire it is at Dish.
yeah, the only company that celebrates net ads that aren't profitable is T-Mobile. They're the only ones to get their rocks off on that. I mean, everybody else is like, I mean, whoop-de-doo. So that promotion was doomed from the start. You're not going to make any money charging that, and you're going to give them a phone too. I mean, you're not trying to be profitable. That's a white. You're waving a white flag. You're asking for help.
Tech guy makes a good point. Sounds like Sprint with all the free stuff and heavy discounts. It does. $25 a month unlimited, right there.
Or the old version of T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're the up and comer, when you're in this position of weakness, you scrap and claw and do anything to try to get business.
They haven't seen any sort of traction in anything that they've tried to promote.
Nothing.
So,
and I still to this day can't understand how they have not tried to break into fixed wireless access. I mean, you couldn't execute a gateway partnership, a vendor, find a solid, dependable firmware, keep updates coming, like just like an address qualifies. They're within a mile of a native Dish site. Like, come on.
I mean, let's be real. They don't have the spectrum.
Yeah, like but if you've got 3 frequency bands on air, there's tower sites. We're seeing 900 megabits per second on Dish. Like, you're telling me you can't monetize that within a mile of the site to an address? That means they got a 10 gig fiber circuit. They got 3 channels of NR. They can't monetize that, EM?
It's a fair question. It's a fair question.
That's a fair question. Yeah.
Like within 1 mile of the site, you can connect to all those frequencies, right? So it's worth a shot.
But I don't think they're paying for a 10 gig.
Then how the hell are they getting the 900 megabits downlink?
No, you can do that with a 5 or a 2 or 1.
No customers.
That's true.
Yeah, if you got an empty cell site, you're the only person connecting to it. You can max out that capacity pretty easily with one device.
Yeah, 500 megabyte, a 500 meg backhaul, you can get 900 megs down. There's nobody else on the site.
All right, guys. Next story.
Very unfortunate, man.
Verizon Communications Chief Jim, I don't know his last name, Gerace is going to retire. 37 years at the company, man. Wow. That is a long time. He's a Verizon lifer. 37 years at the company. He took a leadership position at Verizon Communications in 2013, VP of Verizon's government affairs for the New York region. Began his career with 9X Mobile Communications in 86, precursor company. So that explains his long-standing time at the company. He was part of the Bell Atlantic merger with 9X Mobile, and he was named vice president, public relations, and a member of the senior staff in the new business in 2000. With the merger of Bell Atlantic Mobile and AirTouch to the Verizon Wireless brand. So this looks like just a transitional time, right? So someone who's finishing up their time in the industry. I don't know if that means he's not going to work in any advising levels or anything like that. But this is just, I think, an indication. And I think something we're noticing, Some of the turnover we've seen at Verizon seems to be just people finishing their careers. Tammy Irwin for 30 years, this guy 30 years, the previous CFO who held the position for like 10 years. Like it looks like it's just new folks coming into these positions and these other folks are just retiring or moving on to something more advisory and whatever level, kind of getting away from the daily grind and the heavy loaded positions that they had for so long. So Verizon's got some new faces that have come into the company, most of which appear to be it's just sunsetting. It's just people riding off, on their horse, riding off into the sunset and calling it a day, man. So salute to Jim Grace putting in all those years as a telco executive, and whoever the replacement is, they'll have an important job and role at the company. And I don't know. I guess that's really all that we could say about this, outside of the fact that maybe this creates some new opportunities for some fresh new ideas, fresh new energy. Maybe it's just good succession, for the company and stuff like that. Um, Moose, how do you see this? Anything you want to add to it?
I mean, it is what it is, right? A lot of people. I mean, also in T-Mobile, there's going to be some 20 plus year, 15 plus year departures. Um, I mean, this guy clearly
You remember like
had a
Braxton
successful year.
Carter, Neville Ray, all those guys, they basically walked away from T-Mobile the last couple of years, right?
Yep, successful career, man. Successful.
I think this is a very recurring trend extremely in this industry right now. 'Cause you're just seeing a lot of the people who have been around for decades that are kind of wrapping up their careers. And it's happening all over in every industry, but especially in telco.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be associated with any reason. Just 37 years in, man.
I mean, what's his name? Neville Ray, big
Yeah.
name that
Mhm.
retired.
Yeah.
AT&T is pretty quiet about their leadership changes, but
The head of HR at
Yeah, the HR.
AT&T,
Yeah.
she left. So I mean, at the end of the day, people aren't bad people because they don't want to work 38 years. They'd rather work 37. It doesn't mean the sky's falling or anything like that. I think it's uh, a little bit naive to imply that the sky is falling just because people retire. I mean, I don't think that makes sense. I mean, you got these guys who've been in these roles. He's probably been in an executive leadership role for a decade plus. Financially, I'm sure he's, very much affluent and has the ability to be able to walk away on his own terms. So, congratulations to him and everybody else who decides to um, make that call. I think over the next 1 to 3 years, we'll continue to see that. And, to Ian's point, just about every, major, mid-major company across the country. People are not going to work forever if they don't have to. And, you know, the economy is getting tougher. It's getting harder and harder to make money. And after you've been doing something for 37 years, I mean, he's earned the right to walk away on his own terms. So it should be a good opportunity for, new blood and, new employees to step into these roles. There's going to be some good, positive, attrition probably within these companies. So good, good, good for Jim.
So, MS, that's a great point. I have coworkers who could retire at 30 years of teaching, and they would get like 70% of their retirement. If they go to 33, they will get 90% of their retirement, and if they go to 35, they get 100%. Right? So, and I'm not sure how that value is created or whatever, but yes, people are awarded for X number of years. I'm guessing he triggered that year that got him his full retirement and paid him handsomely. So it's probably true. Yeah, it's probably the case. All
Yeah.
right. All right, guys, we got to talk about this open signal thing. It's got like so many different categories and bits and pieces for us to tear apart. Key findings from the Open Signal report. I got a great panel here with me to discuss this. All right, so first of the key findings. T-Mobile users have 2.5 times faster download speeds than their AT&T peers and 3 times faster than those on Verizon. Keep in mind, this is not root metrics. This is Open Signal. Open Signal is not it's not a firm that does its own testing. It's a firm that collects data points from crowdsource data collection. So they basically just compile all the tests that people have run through these apps, and then they just put it into this massive database and do all the averages and totals. So T-Mobile, with overall speed awards outright, this I guess is, I don't know how many consecutive reports where they've done this. An experience score of 113 megabits for the downlink, and then uplink at 12.1 megabits. They increase their winning margins over both AT&T and Verizon for both metrics. Look, I'm not the person to ask about this. I live in a market where this is not true. I'm not the person that's going to comment on this particular take. This is just their data, right? So are we as a panel concerned that this data from Open Signal doesn't show us that C-band is making a difference? Because root metrics sure showed us that, right? We saw data showing that things were starting to change. Open Signal is telling us a different story. C-band has made no impact because they're saying that T-Mobile has widened their lead in downlink and uplink speed. B, do you have anything to kind of question or kind of second guesses on these results from Open Signal?
Yeah, I mean, it's not scientific testing. I don't trust it very much. It also depends on how you want to spin it. There have been publications that have cited this very same Open Signal report to be able to come to the conclusion that AT&T and Verizon are closing the gap. So it just depends on which news article you decide to click on. But that's the reason, why I personally don't put a huge amount of stock in Open Signal. They're pretty much testing or compiling data based on speed test results, and that's really it. I mean, it's not scientific. It's not phone to phone. It's not location to location. It's just plots on a scatter map, and this is what they all came up with. Let's add it up and divide it by the sum. I mean, I don't want to say it's worthless.
Right. I would agree. I wouldn't say
Yeah,
it's worthless.
it's not worthless. I mean, there's value in the data, but I call to task the overall accuracy of it, because when you look at the root metrics data, T-Mobile doesn't win in almost any of the major mid-major markets. It's almost all Verizon, some AT&T. Once again, I think you had in the first half of last year, AT&T won the nation again as far as the state testing is concerned. So tell me how T-Mobile is doing so great, but in the scientific testing, they don't win doggone there anywhere. It doesn't make sense to me. I have a hard time put so much stock into Open Signal. It just does, something seems off here. How T-Mobile always seems to do so well in this crowdsourced testing, but when you do scientific testing, everybody's got the same phone, same location, same time, start to test. They cannot win scientific testing almost anywhere. They continue to get get themselves destroyed. But as soon as you go over the Open Signal, all of a sudden, it's sunny skies and no clouds. Something's not right about that.
Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Sorry, I almost missed it. Question: does Verizon run the risk of choking out their own bandwidth for their postpaid customers if they keep running new MVNOs on their network? I don't think so. I think they're perfectly comfortable with the ability to provide 10 gig fiber circuits at a large scale, a fully modernized network with lots of CBRS and C-band. And, in some markets, you get a nice, substantial millimeter wave build. They got a lot of C-RAN small cells that they're upgrading and building from scratch. I'm not really worried about Verizon taking on MVNO traffic. I think they invite more of it, actually. They're scaling upgrades pretty nicely. I haven't seen anything faster myself. So I wouldn't be concerned about it. I know there's some parts where the network's outdated, but once those sites are upgraded, I don't think MVNOs are a concern. Most of those customers are low usage anyways, right? So I wouldn't be too worried about it. You could make an argument that maybe fixed wireless access could become an issue in some instances, but even that, I think Verizon's going to answer that question. Once we get to that bridge, they build capacity. I'm not too worried about them. But thank you for the super chat, my friend. And to kind of respond to B's statement about the data, it's interesting because of the nature of the way that they do collect the data versus the root metrics testing. A 100 megabit per second speed test through root metrics has the same value of a 1000 gigabit per second speed test. It's like once you reach a certain speed threshold, the extra speed doesn't mean anything, right? It's just you just don't want a throttled, choked out network. You don't want a 1 megabit speed test. You don't want that to impact the usage of the phone, which I think that's what root metrics is about. It's about usage, where you got calling, you got texting, you got some reliability metrics, you got accessibility and latency. This is really just looking at download speeds, right? So I think that's where part of this distinguishing is, between the two types of data and tests.
So really quickly on that one, there was an article that I hope everybody gets a chance to read from The Verge a while back called this new protocol called L4S. Basically what it is this compression, right, that we have on YouTube videos or any, like Netflix, right? That really determines how fast you get the content that you really need, right? And then for websites, obviously how they're constructed, right? So what basically L4S is, and I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. L4S just makes everything extremely smooth. And the way that it does it is that it prioritizes the different traffic that you're requesting, right? In the future, right, because Apple is experimenting with this, and I know Google is going to want to follow whatever standard is the best practice for the industry. The L4S standard basically makes everything an instant load. So speed is irrelevant at that point, because we all know in this podcast, right, speed equates to capacity, does not equate to a better performing network. Just at that particular moment, there's more capacity, right? Now, with that L4S standard, right, if it works as it is intended and how it's working right now in the testing that they're seeing, is that anytime you load a website or you download a YouTube video right to your phone, right, through the app, it's just instant load. Instant load. So I can't wait for more companies, right, to be testing this. I know Comcast is one of those ISPs that is already testing this a lot in a much more bigger threshold. The way that they described it in the article was certain gateways of theirs have already enabled the L4S protocol. So if your device has L4S, your gateway has L4S, and then your content that you're trying to get from the server has L4S, right, in their server management. If every single part of the chain has it, you'll experience a totally different internet experience than we've had in the past. So, yeah, I mean, this open signal thing, completely irrelevant to me. Sure, in terms of capacity, T-Mobile has more capacity at the moment, but we all know, right? Verizon will have the most amount of capacity once everything is said and done, right?
Right.
They
It's
just
just
have,
just this report isn't indicating that currently.
right, exactly. It's they need more time to cook, just like Sneed tells them, right? It's cooking, it's cooking.
All right, so Verizon did win all 3 5G experiential awards. That's not the first time. That's actually them defending that title. They had that in the previous report as well, which we all kind of looked at that and thought, well, that's crazy because they're nowhere near the speed lead in 5G, but they continue to thrive in 5G video experience, live video experience, and gaming experience. Although all U.S. national carriers did rate at excellent with a 58 or above, Technically Verizon did win the 5G stuff, and we know that's T-Mobile's claim to fame. If you look at their branding, if you look at the marketing, the commercials, they emphasize all things 5G. 5G availability, 5G speeds, all those types of things, but it's not equating to a 5G experience that distinguishes them from anyone. Really, it seems to be Verizon. So I find that interesting that speed doesn't win you an experience award, which what do folks what do folks do with their phones is it's an experience. It's not a speed crown per se that you need. So I find that interesting. Additionally, T-Mobile surpasses the 200 meg milestone for 5G download speed, while Verizon increases its lead for 5G upload speed. The numbers here as follows. T-Mobile at 205 megabits per second. That's the first time any company has gone over that landmark. AT&T and Verizon have whittled away at T-Mobile's lead with scores of 43.5 megabits for AT&T and then 39 megabits for Verizon. C-band spectrum for both AT&T and Verizon showing in this particular segment. Verizon's 5G upload speed, that's the second consecutive time where they are winning that segment. They're at 20 megabits per second uplink. And they have a 2.3 megabit margin over T-Mobile, who just barely went up from last test at 0.3 megabits. Anything to take away from there? I guess, I'll bring you in on this one. Do you think this just continues in this trajectory? AT&T, Verizon continue to close that gap? I don't see it any other way.
I think this is just a good reminder that they're closing the gap and they continue to close the gap every day. Other than that, I've never really been a fan of OpenSignal's reports. I think they're extremely vague in the testing metrics, which is why I'm not a fan of them. But the key takeaway for Verizon and AT&T should be keep your foot on the gas, keep building out the networks.
So this one's interesting. Verizon wins coverage experience outright. T-Mobile takes the top spot for 5G coverage. I don't know exactly how these two things are brought together, right? AT&T has the availability award. It says here that they had a score of 99.5%, 0.2% better than Verizon, and 1% better than T-Mobile, right? And then Verizon has the coverage experience at a rating of 9.5 out of a 10-point scale, 0.5 points ahead of AT&T, 1 point ahead of T-Mobile. So I'm with you, EM. This is weird, man. Just the wording, the terminology, the testing segments and names. It's kind of confusing.
Yeah, and the thing that I don't know if they're sourcing data from like other speed test apps or other collection methods, but I don't know a single person who uses the OpenSignal app or the speed test app that they have. Like, if
Would that be
there's
like if Signal Check Pro was running in the background or something?
well, I don't even think that that's part of their portfolio.
Oh, it's not? Okay,
No.
I
So that's the thing. Like, if you
I
have
know
like
there's an Open Signal app, but I mean, I haven't had it installed on any of my phones for a few years.
exactly. So like if they're only collecting data from a small subset of users that have that app, of course it's going to be skewed. Like when you're dependent on user collected data.
This company bought Ookla, didn't they?
No, Ookla bought Root.
Ookla bought Root, that's what it is. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't know. Nothing. They don't really offer anything to the conversation just because I know a lot of people who can discredit their experience to what OpenSignal reports in their markets. And the fact that it's not scientific testing means it means little to nothing to the carriers that actually care about these types of reports.
Well, carriers pay Root, right? This is just crowdsourced data, so there definitely is something to be said about that. Even the carriers value Root. They're willing to pay them to do that drive testing. T-Mobile won the Consistent Quality Award, second consecutive time. It says here they scored 80.3%, 3.7% lead over Verizon, and looks like about a 4.6% increase over AT&T. I'm trying to look here. What does it say? Measures download speed, upload speed, latency, jitter, packet loss, and time to the first byte of data. That's what they call consistency. Okay. All right. Well, you know what we're going to do now. Let's do this.
They must have meant consistent packet loss on T-Mobile, because that's how my experience is with them.
Oh man, here's there's some other data points down here that we'll look at. So what you could do with their report, you could do it from a national perspective, and you could also do it from regional, and you could select different states. Shall we look at some states? Let's go to Ohio. T-Mobile, and T-Mobile, and that is for all categories. Video experience, live video experience, gaming experience, download speed experience, and upload speed experience. I just want to say, guys, I've lived in Ohio my whole life. I have been using all three carriers in Ohio for the better part of the last 6 or 7 years. There's only one carrier that has some trouble with FaceTime calls, video calls, and live streaming, and that is T-Mobile. Verizon holds up really good. AT&T holds up really good. T-Mobile is troublesome at times. So I don't know what this live video experience rating is for T-Mobile in Ohio, but there's just no way. I mean, I drove through multiple counties on a rural drive trip. This is just no way, man. No way. With respect to the other stuff, I mean, that's all fair game. I'm sure T-Mobile could have taken those, but I definitely tell you guys that live video experience is not accurate. No way. I mean, I remember literally on a FaceTime call with Dennis like last year, and I was staring at the T-Mobile tower. I was like a quarter mile away, and the FaceTime call dropped. I was on a phone call with Nikki, and the call dropped on the freeway. I'm like, and I don't know, I was probably like 50 miles, 60 miles out from my county. It just, I find it really, really hard to believe that, man. So EM, you know, you're talking about the validity of this data. I got questions, bro. I got questions. Moose. They got T-Mobile taking everything in Texas, bro.
I love it's so funny. So one of the things we've talked about in the past, right, is if your population isn't growing and you're still upgrading the networks, 10 gig backhaul, all that, right? You've gotten to a point where you're easily going to be getting, you know, like in Hialeah as a perfect example, right? The Cuyahoga County. I anticipate that you're going to consistently get fast speeds from all carriers because the population density per sector is totally different than like Los Angeles or New York City or Atlanta or Chicago. But I'm now at the same time, right? The majority of the state should be also consistent. Even if they don't have the 10 gig backhaul, should be consistent, you know, easily 300, 400 plus Mbps on all carriers with 10 gig backhaul, even in the rural, right? If you have a gig, easily 3 to 400 Mbps, easily. So I don't know, this speed issue, whenever we talk about speed, I always think about what's the population in that area? How many users are actually there? I mean, damn, even Dish can get to 300, you know?
Market share, right?
Yeah, the market share. So I'm excited for, you know, the road trip of the year that Sneed has been talking about for years, you know, where he'll be able to test out different markets, different population densities, bigger than CLE, smaller than CLE. How do they fare, right? It's going to be interesting.
Hey, thanks DJ One Eye for the super chat. He said, "Hey man, I have a S23 and when I enable 5G SA, calls instantly fail. I've tried eSIM, a physical SIM with no luck. Any ideas? And yes, I've reset net settings." Look, here's what I know about the whole like 5G SA thing. If you're talking about the T-Mobile network, two things have to be true. Number one, you have to have SA enabled on your phone, obviously. But two, they have to have standalone like networking going on in your market on all those tower sites. And voice over NR has to be enabled. And as I've learned from Ricky and Carlos, some of that SA stuff is fraudulent because they'll disable all LTE bands and they'll still complete calls over LTE. So I don't know what the real is. EM, I know you've done some of this testing, haven't you, with the SA and the voice over NR stuff?
Yeah, when I was in Utah, I was able to force SA on my Samsung, so it was only connecting to NR, and I was able to make and complete calls. But then I come home, I do the same thing, and it does exactly what he's saying. You make a phone call, it instantly fails. So it just depends on if they have the voice over NR enabled in your market. And to me, from what I've seen, it's really Ericsson markets only that have the VoNR enabled.
And
Nokia markets, nothing.
I don't know, DJ, like what market you're in or what type of radio gear they're using. I don't know. And honestly, I wouldn't lose any sleep over it if I were you. Being a beta tester for these companies is a losing proposition because what ends up happening is shit becomes unreliable. And at the worst, most inopportune time, you're going to drop calls. So you're better off even just putting your phone on LTE, damn it. I there are times where I put my T-Mobile phone into LTE. And while I'm sacrificing speed and bandwidth, the reliability is there and my battery life is improved. So, a lot of question marks are still out there about SA and voice over NR. I wouldn't rush towards any of those technologies just because they're new doesn't make them better. So and thank you again for the second super chat. My brother has an iPhone 15 and it works fine. Yeah, because his calls are probably going over LTE.
Yeah, you can't force the
Yeah.
iPhones to stay on 5G standalone, even if you have that toggle enabled, it'll backfall to LTE. The only way that you can really force standalone is on an Android device, and if you're doing it through that, it's not going to work if they don't have VoNR.
Yeah. So, and like I said, don't be in a rush to new tech that hasn't proven to be reliable. It'll impact your experience. So we all love cutting edge tech and those types of things, but don't be in a rush to be experimental. So when I was looking at the ratings for Ohio, and 58 is an excellent rating. AT&T came in at 57.4, Verizon at 57.1, T-Mobile at 62.5. So they're all at excellent or right there. Live video experience, AT&T at 57.9, Verizon at 55.3, T-Mobile at 60.2. They're all pretty close. Gaming, they're all over that. It's just the download speed. I don't know, man. Looks like Verizon's doing some pretty good things in Alaska, apparently. I don't know
They're
what
the
G.
only carrier other than GCI that has a native network.
Yeah, oh, that's what the G stands for. Gotcha. Okay, GCI, I remember that. Some Verizon action in Kansas, Iowa, and Indiana. Some AT&T action in Maine. Shout out to Rage and Dusty. North Carolina has some AT&T action. South Dakota is all Verizon. A little bit of T-Mobile in there too, I guess. 3 and 3. And Verizon in Wyoming. And I believe those are places where Verizon has 200 megahertz of C-band, if I remember correctly. Washington State's got just a little bit of AT&T there, a lot of T-Mobile. West Virginia, T-Mobile. It was an old Chantel market.
Wisconsin should be all blue and red.
No,
should
sir.
be. It's not.
No, sir. No, sir. I see mostly T-Mobile, except this category, which is completely split up, which is live video experience.
Yeah, they lack native coverage in the majority of the states. So I don't understand how they managed to win. That's crazy.
Hey, DJ, thanks again for the super chat. Maybe consider checking your firmware. Maybe. I don't know if you have an unlocked device or if you have a carrier lock device. That changes a lot of stuff too. Raging Dusty says AT&T the go to Maine until Verizon turns in their site here in Jackman, Maine. AT&T is the GOAT. Chaim says, have to share that my homie Verizon site is finally fixed. 10 gig backhaul now, ping times 11 to 17 on C-band, 17 to 24 on LT. I'm so happy they finally fixed that for you, Chaim. Salute to the engineering team that finally took care of that. That was hell in a handbasket trying to get that site fixed. Let me tell you guys, I know I'm all familiar with that problem.
That's really good ping times for Samsung gear.
Crazy, right? Yeah. T-Mobile phone bought from them. Yeah, it could be an issue. Firmware can play a part. If you can get unlocked firmware, I think you could rule out some of those things. All right. All right, so what else is on your mind, guys? Has there been any topics or any news that you guys wanted to discuss here on the show? Testing that you've done recently or anything you want to ask or share?
I mean, the couple of interesting things, right? More 10 gig backhauled circuits have been popping up just in the first 2 weeks of the month. And as predicted, right, significant amounts of C-band have been turned on. It's just wait and see how quickly, right?
By the way, Moose,
Yeah.
people have been really happy with C-band sites getting turned on in the new year.
Oh yeah.
Remember we had the projection, thousands of sites getting turned on across the country.
Right.
Dude, it like literally people were like, boom, like January 2nd, 3rd, 4th, like sites were getting lit up. And people were saying like the AT&T network, Verizon network, they're like, it's a substantial upgrade. They feel and notice the difference in the experience.
Yeah, and what you're gonna see more and more, which I'm not opposed to this. What I'm about to say, I feel like I am opposed to one thing though, and I'll say this. We all would prefer a one-touch strategy for any carrier, right? You take however long it takes, you get it upgraded. However, if the backhaul is not ready for whatever reason, right? Let's say the backhaul is not ready to be upgraded to 10 gig, and it's still at 1 or 5 or 2, right? I'm not opposed for the backhaul upgrade to take place later, but the C-band gets installed now. It is more expensive, but I'd rather the customers enjoy, the ultra wideband or the 5G plus now, because that could alleviate some congestion, right, in that area.
I agree with you, Moose. I think that I would make the caveat that as long as it's at least a gig,
Right.
I think that's fair. Anything less than that, and you're really not improving the experience for
Right.
customers at all.
What up, Dennis? What up?
Oh shit.
Not much, man. Happy to be on. Just submitted my master's assignments because school's back up and running.
Yeah.
Been enjoying my classes actually. They're cool. But on the topic of the C-band, man, I've been really impressed with. Honestly, I'm impressed with everyone. I mean, you saw on my Twitter, for the first time and for the first time on Verizon, I saw Gig Plus. I saw it at a couple locations, and one of them was as high as 1.6 gigabits per second on mid-band, which is really awesome to see from Verizon because they've traditionally they've been the slowest in the last few years. So it was really nice to see. that level of performance, because I know others have seen it. AT&T has been obviously performing tremendously, regularly seeing Gig Plus from AT&T. And then T-Mobile has also been very capacitive. They've been upgrading a lot of their sites with 10 gig and again regularly seeing Gig Plus. So it's really nice to see that generational leap, because that's something that even in LT's best of heydays, I don't think was like a regular occurrence to really see, unless you were talking about what was it called, LRA or L whatever it was that AT&T was messing around with on the LTE. I can't remember what band it was, but it was basically glorified Wi-Fi for range.
Oh, LAA, right?
LAA, yeah. So like
that's band 46.
There we go. Yeah, that was like the only way you would see like a gig.
It was
on
good
LTE.
for like 50 feet or whatever.
Yeah, that's why I said it was basically glorified Wi-Fi. That was the only way you would see like a gig.
I'd rather have Wi-Fi, dog, honestly.
Yeah, so that was like the only way you would see that kind of speed. So it's really nice to see the networks all being, at least the major three networks, all being capacitive. Hopefully we'll continue to see densification occur over the course of this year. I'm very much keeping my eyes on Verizon specifically, because they're the ones that I feel has the most. They have a really robust track record, obviously, amongst the community, and they're spending a lot of money. So I'm really, I have high hopes to see what the results will be once they finish this mid-band rollout for their network, as they continue to densify and upgrade their sites, especially in rural.
Let me get to these super chats here. S Blue Tech salute, man. Thank you for always supporting us. Notice the huge increase of CBand for Verizon across Northern and Central California, looking great. I've heard they've done a pretty good job there too. So you're not the first person to report that. So I think we got a trend. Thank you. And then Green with a super chat. Good evening. How do you think the carriers are going to perform at the Super Bowl? Look, I'll tell you what, man. I think at the Super Bowl that all three will be fine. I do think one will be superior, one will be the best, and I think it's going to be Verizon. What is Los saying, bro?
He's giving you the finger, man. But
yeah,
all right,
bro.
Los, unmute yourself.
I'm enjoying my good street on the corner. You know, this is the hood, bro. So
what you got, tacos, Los?
Yeah, right now we're eating good Mexican al pastor tacos that are better than tacos de gordo moose. I'm sorry, but they're way better.
Fuck, no way.
They're way better.
Okay, so I'm planning soon, within the next 2 months, Chacha. I'm coming over there. We're going to Tacos del Gordo, and the same night we're going to that taco place.
Whatever place you took me to, Carlos, where I ate literally like 20 different tacos, if you remember that, whatever that place was fire, where I had literally every single taco in the menu. That's where I want.
But bro,
look, at Allegiant Stadium, Verizon is going to be the best. AT&T will be good. AT&T will be good enough. They'll have their temporary solutions. They'll have their millimeter wave. They'll have their bolts, their cows. I think the only concern I have is T-Mobile going to do something outside of temporary solutions? That's my only concern.
AT&T will be good because I've been seeing them put up millimeter wave all around the stadium.
There you go.
So
permanent solutions, right, Los? That's what you've been called.
I will say this though, for CES, AT&T failed me. They failed me, and I called them out. Trust me, I had a very heated conversation, and I told them, you guys better get your act together with the goddamn Ericsson, because this is unacceptable that you're dropping calls in places that shouldn't be dropping calls.
Bro,
were people complaining about AT&T at CES?
People were complaining more about T-Mobile fucking calls. Like when I was talking to the Bearded Dragon, it was like we were saying something, and then out of nowhere it's like if he muted for 30 seconds to a minute, and then out of nowhere he comes back. I'm like, what the hell?
Even the millimeter wave that AT&T put up in Vegas with the Nokia, the new stuff, it was rough when I was there. It doesn't perform very well.
Here's what I'll say. Verizon's definitely making a name for themselves as the venue champ. I have no problem saying that their millimeter wave and their LTE assets and the way they're able to deploy and work out these agreements with these facilities is definitely incredible. So yeah, I agree with your synopsis, Sneed. Verizon will definitely be the best performer at the Super Bowl. That's not a question. But I do think that all the carriers will have enough capacity on air, like you touched on, whether it be with temporary solutions with CALs or just from even. Honestly, I know you probably disagree with me. Maybe it depends on what we're defining as good enough, but I think with the amount of mid-band that's still available right now, I think all the carriers could probably survive just with those assets to be
At the
good
Super
enough.
Bowl, no.
I mean, how many people are sitting at a Super Bowl? It's like 80,000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if you have enough macro surrounding it, right? You got like what? Like no.
Because the macros are serving the surrounding area as well. It's not just that building. So you're gonna need DAS, you're gonna need small cells. Like I would have an outdoor DAS and indoor DAS. I would have CRAN all around the premise, like on each end of parking lots and stuff like that. And I would have indoor millimeter wave. You have to have those types of deployments. And if you can't do CRAN outside, that's where the Colts go. That's where the cows go.
Yeah. I mean,
a venue like the Sphere, you could get away with a mid-band only solution. It's got a capacity of about
What's the venue size?
18,000. As long as you got a dense enough deployment, you can get away with mid-band, but Allegiant Stadium's got 65,000.
What about the staff? What you know what I'm saying? Like, what about the visitors? What, like, outside of the actual fans that are there, right? Like all the and this gets overlooked. The uplink required at that moment in time, right? Because people are live streaming and uploading content for creators. That's a totally different ballgame than downlink speed.
True.
It's the uplink that becomes the trouble, because with live streaming, you're on both sides of the network. Downlink, uplink, simultaneous stuff.
True. Yeah, I don't know.
And what about the fiber circuits, Dennis?
Yeah.
You know, that stuff's important. That's a bottleneck.
I got a question though, real quick. What's the amount of subscribers that a macro can service in the 5G era? Like, what is that number?
What's an upgraded baseband do, Moose?
I love it. Okay, so there's a couple things here. Let's talk about from the baseband unit itself first, before I get into this actual spectrum. Okay. Back in 2016, okay, the maximum a stable cell site can host was around 12 to 15,000 users per sector.
Okay.
Per sector. But as soon as you get into that realm, you have to start prioritizing 911 calls versus data traffic, because nobody's going to actually have enough capacity at that time, right, to actually do anything other than make an emergency phone call. So what you had to do was actually disable carrier aggregation. If you have that many people in one sector, you actually have to disable carrier aggregation. So people are on specific bands. The cell site is actually programmed to not switch between bands depending on the UE, what their distance is. So nowadays, right, with the amount of spectrum, with the amount of upgrades to the baseband unit, you can easily do 20, 25,000 with the amount of capacity that we have on air today, especially with a 10 gig backhaul circuit. However, right, we know that there have been places in Dallas, I've talked to Sneed about this, during Thanksgiving, that T-Mobile was completely congested, both LTE, 5G, and SA. And when I say completely congested, I mean that N41 was completely unusable. Okay? People don't understand what I mean by unusable. I'm literally saying that N41 was so congested that you could not do anything except do a 911 emergency phone call.
That's crazy.
So that blew my mind that that's even possible, but it did happen. So even today, in today's age, where you can do 25,000 users, no problem, all connected to a sector, right? You still can congest it.
That's why density is important.
Who densifies better than anybody in the industry? Which company?
You're not going to get the answer you want from me, B. I'm just straight up telling you that right now, and I have actual facts for Pittsburgh's market to back it up. So
For your market, I will rely on RootMetrics data, but overall,
Okay, well, what about Allegiant Stadium? Kind of, we're looking at these venues. I think we know.
yeah, I mean, who identifies the best of all three carriers?
I mean, Verizon's density is unmatched in Vegas. Let's be honest.
Well, how about this? The density project for Verizon in Vegas started 7 years ago. You know, AT&T and T-Mobile have been getting punched in the mouth for the last 3, 4, 5 years.
yeah, but Verizon had to densify. That's the reason why. Like, but
Well,
No, I
everybody
get it.
has to
I get it. But
densify.
they
I mean,
did it. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like,
I mean, what are we talking about?
well. So here's my angle on this, Dennis. What is Verizon going to have to do this year to prepare for the Super Bowl? Not much. They already did it.
Hold on.
It's been done for years.
Hold on. They definitely do have to do something. So one of the things that they have to do
Purchase
is
ticket.
for all the DAS systems that are in all the hotels, they should be upgrading to C-band or
They are.
right.
They are.
So that's the one thing that all the carriers need to be looking at is if you have a DAS system in the hotels, you upgrade to your mid-band 5G spectrum.
Okay, so what else? What else do they have
The
to
second thing that they're going to do is upgrade the circuits to those DAS systems, right? The backhaul coming in. So, for example, Allegiant Stadium should have a minimum of 100 gig backhaul from AT&T, just like they have at AT&T Stadium. The same thing. Okay. Now, what else? Right? Obviously, you're going to have redundancies because that's another thing that T-Mobile fails to think about every time. What happens if this thing goes down? Right? What's my backup? Okay. Does T-Mobile have gas generators for their DAS system? That's another thing we've never talked about in this channel. We always talk about gas generations or diesel generation or whatever for a macro, but what about for a DAS? What about if there is a terrorist attack, right? All of these different things need to be taken into consideration, especially if Las Vegas is being considered for the World Cup.
Let's put it this way, Moose. You don't got to worry about that because guess what? The casinos don't run on the main grid. They run all off of a solar farm that's located 35 miles northwest of Vegas.
So they're on their own.
They don't even run off the main grid. The main grid is just a backup. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, the trickiest part about DAS systems, and that we don't talk about this enough either, is that a lot of times the carriers don't even own them. And ownership and maintenance and upgrades on them is solely reliant on whoever owns the DAS. And if it's the private building owner and they don't want to play ball with whatever carrier, it can be really challenging to get them modernized.
Those neutral networks seem like something solid, man. If that could develop better.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of those, for sure.
Yeah, you touched on exactly what I was going to actually bring up with DAS systems. I was going to say, well, it was going to be a question, but yeah, most DASs that I'm aware of aren't owned by any particular carrier, unfortunately.
Well, it depends, but a lot of the legacy stuff was not, but most of the newer deployments are, from my understanding.
That is true.
So then I guess that leads to a
from
question then. Real quick, if a carrier owns that DAS system, are they gonna do they end up leasing it out or have to lease it out to other providers if they're willing to pay to be on there, or how does that work if they own it?
I'm sure it's a case by case basis, but from what I was told, I got a buddy who works at T-Mobile and they send out these press releases. Apparently Verizon owns the DAS at Lambeau Field, and they actually were able to work out a lease agreement with T-Mobile to get on that DAS. So I'm assuming it's just a negotiation thing that happens behind closed doors.
Reason I asked that question is just because from a competitive marketplace standpoint, I feel like you would probably run into a similar issue that big cable telco has been running into recently, where they no longer can, run the lines to a building and say that they own it to have exclusive property rights, in the traditional telecom space. So they had to get creative to work around loopholes to be able to do what they've been doing, where the property owner ends up having to own it that last bit. But anywho, Lois, you were going to say something. My bad.
Yeah, no, I was telling Sneed, look in your DM on Twitter X. I sent you a map. That's all the millimeter wave that's going up here in the next 30 to 45 days. Mainly, a lot of the ones in yellow are 30.
So is this, they already have, builds in the area, they're just deepening the builds, or is this all like greenfield?
No, this is deepening from what they already have everywhere else around the valley. They're deepening these areas because they said that this is where a lot of traffic is going to be in the hotels, like, people staying off the strip.
That's pretty impressive. Should I share it on the screen?
Go ahead. It don't matter.
Okay.
Greg actually got all the stuff from the Verizon plug and put it all up.
Ooh-wee.
And from his sources from, Crown Castle and stuff.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share this with you guys here. Shout out to Los for making this available to us here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of us for a second. And then let's do... Let's look at this density. Let's zoom it out, right? So here's your look at Vegas as a whole. If I zoom in to segments of town, you've got some action just south of the airport. You've got
so the
action.
Ones in red, Sneed, the ones in red are already completed. Those are already completed. They just got done. This is all new build stuff. The ones in yellow are the ones that are going to be done right before the Super Bowl, and the ones in blue are going to either be done close to the Super Bowl or after the Super Bowl date.
That's pretty impressive. That's a lot. These are small cells?
All millimeter wave, bro. All millimeter wave and C-band.
I'm going to ask the dumbest question in the world, probably. But when we're looking at this grid right here, I'm seeing a lot of these millimeter wave sites hitting the suburbs. And I guess my question is just why?
Airbnbs, bro.
Why not?
They basically took coordination to where a lot of the Airbnbs and stuff are.
Let me ask you something, Dennis. If you had MCI fiber in all these locations, wouldn't you have small cells as long as you could have access to the poles?
I mean, I guess. I mean, if I was,
this one's by the Home Depot, a Walmart Supercenter,
right?
This one's by another plaza. This one's by a coffee shop. This one's by a restaurant. This one's at a neighborhood. Now you can monetize that. I could sell home internet there. There's no FiOS there, right? So I can sell 5G home internet literally down this whole street, right? If I got a node here, I'm pointing a sector this way. I'm pointing a sector this way. I'm pointing a sector this way. Why the hell not, man?
I mean, all I'm going to say is, like, if I was network owner for a day, right? When it comes to millimeter wave, the way I would take the approach for that lever, that tool, is, first, obviously the venues where the density is going to be the absolute highest, right? Because I want to make sure not to crash my surrounding macros when there's some type of event. Then after that, though, I would be looking at like MDUs, high density like housing, so like apartment like communities where there's like apartment complexes, or something more than like your standard bog like single family home, which is where I'm seeing a lot of these now. You made the argument about the fixed wireless cell, which, yeah, you can monetize.
So like this one, like Martinique Bay Apartments, Dennis?
Yeah. Like something like that.
I mean, these...
But
I don't know,
keep in mind that this doesn't include their pre-existing infrastructure. So
yeah, this doesn't show their macros and what these small cells are going to be potentially designed to offload.
How about this business district here?
Yeah,
how about
like that? Yeah, like
I think they're nailing it, bro. I'm not mad at them at all.
I'm never mad. Let me clarify. I'm not mad. I'm never going to be mad
South
about
Park condos, Dennis. You think it's smart to put one here?
Yeah.
So, what's your?
I'm never mad about a carrier putting down more small cells. It was just the question of why they picked those places regarding these events, right? Like it didn't make
Carlos, tell me about these places, bro, where you see all these sites. You know this area.
So a lot of Airbnbs are in a lot of those neighborhoods, or you'll literally have half the neighborhood that's owned by investors in their Airbnbs, and then you got a lot of those businesses you'll have near there. There's hotels, there's motels,
Do you think,
the smaller
Los,
casinos.
do you think the 5G home internet's an option for those Airbnbs?
Of course, and not just the Airbnbs, but those residents that live near there too.
Yeah.
And I think they're targeting too, like a lot of those areas don't have fiber either.
Who's the wireline providers out here?
Cox, CenturyLink, Black Quantum, AT&T fiber is only in the hood, so we can't even consider them an option at the moment.
They're not in these areas.
And then you got a bits of Verizon Fios and certain little bits of industrial business places.
You guys have a lot of country clubs out here in this side of town.
Yep.
Wealthy people need a good signal, Dennis. Come on, bro.
I'm gonna ask a second question that's probably gonna sound really dumb. But why, a lot of times we talk about new tech builds and Vegas seems to be the hotspot for everything. And I just got to ask, why is this particular PEA getting significantly more investment, I feel like?
10 million unique visitors every week.
It's not even that, Dennis. So
growing population.
The thing is our permits are literally dumb easy. You can build everything, and 3 days before you're completed with your mission, you can file the permit. It'll be approved. You don't have to file the permit right away. That's the thing. You can just build and then file the permit later. So a lot of tech stuff love that, bro, because they can get away basically with everything. You think about it.
Well, I'm jealous of you, Carlos. I'm jealous of you, Carlos. You've got like 10 fiber providers over in Vegas. From what you've told me, you got your 20 different WISPs, and now you got Verizon's mmWave 5 gig everywhere. So you're overserved for sure with connectivity.
Well, they're and the good thing about this, what they're doing right now, is they're finishing up. They're tightening the grid more, bro. Their plan, from what Greg was gathering, and then from my person that I know, by 2026, bro, they want to have 3/4 of the city covered with mmWave.
That's a tall order. Good luck on it, but unless something changes with the tech to allow for extended range, that's you're talking. At that point, I would just tell Verizon just to do Fios to every household, because you're talking about putting in basically a node level grid.
What? No. What? No.
Well, this is the thing though, Dennis. Like, the reason why they're doing it is because you got to think about it, bro. I know this is early to talk about this because we haven't even hit 5G advanced, but they will be ready for 6G. Those terahertz frequencies are going to need this type of densification. They will be ready for it. All they got to do is literally just add equipment to those existing poles. That's it. Easy.
Based off the talk from people that I know in the telco space, there's very little enthusiasm or motivation for 6G. B, do you agree with me from people that you talk to?
Yes, I do.
Well, of course.
Like,
but
that doesn't say very little. I mean, like, to the point where I even wonder if the carriers are even going to invest in it. Kind of like little enthusiasm.
Well, I don't think it's that little, but it is smaller than 5G, and it's just because there has to be customers who actually want it, and right now, the only true use case for 5G right now has been fixed wireless. So you got to have a customer base that actually wants to pay for improved capacity and improved performance. Right now, the carriers just don't have that. So there's no incentive, it seems, to invest in 6G heavily and try to roll it out quicker. Hans, for example, is on record saying he probably doesn't see a 6G phone and all that stuff coming out until 2032. And normally that stuff starts to launch, right around, 2030, 2020, 2010, that type of situation. That's 2 years late. So, I mean, there's got to be a customer base that actually wants to pay for that improved performance. And it's just not there right now. So I think that's why you're seeing a cycle from the carriers that's pivoting towards profitability, raising prices and things of that nature in order to pay for what they already paid to launch 5G. It was really expensive. So,
and it continues to be very expensive. The densification needed is going to take years to catch up. And the more carriers have on the ground and the more that they can get existing, the easier it's going to be for them to modernize stuff as the technology progresses.
Yep, which is why small cells are so important.
I know this is probably going to age like milk when I say this, but I can't even see a world where we use terahertz spectrum like for a mobile use case. Like
May not be for mobile. May not be for mobile though.
Fair.
Most of the innovation that's going to be coming down the pipe is not going to be for the consumer. I know everybody's excited about consumer ads and blah 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 and phone ads. All right, cool. That's not the new wave for most of these carriers. They're looking to businesses and enterprise solutions and things of that nature. That's venues, in building systems, DAS experiences. That's the new wave, not necessarily your phone. And I'm not talking about people going and taking videos, but powering the systems and powering the content that that stuff is streaming off of. The enterprise solutions, that's the new wave, not how many phone ads you get.
I'm just going to add on to what you're saying, B. Like, yeah, I mean, we can see it with the companies. Like, we know Comcast has been pushing really hard in the IP transit space for businesses and enterprises, and we've seen Verizon with their fiber investments, AT&T with their fiber investments. We talk about the consumer stuff, but really these big investments are for the enterprise space. It's for the transit and other technologies related to that. That's where the money is.
Yep.
Exactly. The money
guaranteed long-term ROI.
And not just guaranteed long-term ROI. I mean, we're seeing government contracts being awarded for it, so it's being paid for by the government in a lot of these circumstances. And in terms of the ROI is a lot shorter. We're talking like 5 years max versus like 30, 40 plus for a lot of these consumer build-outs.
I mean, let's see. Blind G asked the question: what happens in enterprise eventually trickles down to consumers sometimes. Yeah, exactly. But consumers don't want to pay, and that's what the carriers are ultimately, targeting, is that consumers don't want to pay. T-Mobile's customer base and their narrative within the industry has made that very clear.
Yep.
And
finish.
If customers aren't gonna pay, then they're going to go to customers who are willing to pay, and that's going to end up being government, enterprise, and business.
Yep.
So here's the thing I want to say. A lot of times we say customers don't want to pay on the show. And while that sentiment or statement is broad stroke sort of true, I don't think it necessarily grasps the whole. By that I mean customers don't want to pay for something that doesn't change their life, right? Like we were talking about experiences earlier. Like if I'm a happy AT&T customer getting 100 plus meg on LTE, right? And I'm able to do everything I want on my phone, right? AT&T giving me 5G plus doesn't change my experience in any way, shape, or form when I interact with their network. Like, yes, it's really cool to see Gig Plus. I get excited because I'm a network nerd, right? Run a speed test, it's fun. But outside of that speed test, there's no use case that got presented to me that changes the experience in any meaningful way, right? Like when we went from 3G to LTE, right? We got all kinds of new stuff. We saw, social media really, really blow up. I'm talking like, your Snapchats, your TikToks, we saw that blow up. We got the Uber Eats and the Ubers of the world, right? We got all these different things that happen that just weren't realistically possible on 3G, video being the biggest one, right? Nothing has happened yet to make the additional capacity that 5G is providing translate to a real experience where it's like, okay, I want to pay for this thing, right? Like, obviously consumers are happy when they're obviously additional capacity generally does have a correlation to a more reliable networking experience, right? Not having to worry about being your data being managed or dealing with like some pixelation or buffering, right? People like having faster time to their content and being able to upload and their hotspot being more useful, whatever. But we're still talking about existing use cases that were existing in the LTE era, so it makes it a harder sales pitch to monetize on the 5G piece. If something comes around in the private space, like maybe it's the Vision Pro, maybe something like that happens that makes it really cool, or maybe it's Zuck's multiverse idea, then you'll start seeing consumer wallets tend to open up, right? Because consumers only bulk at price when you're not identifying and addressing any of their other concerns to overcome objections. Price as an objection is usually like if someone really wants something, right? Thinks they really need it, they're going to find a way to generally pay for it, right? Like, I hate to use this example, but let's take like a medical example, right? If you were having a heart attack and you got pulled to the hospital and you needed to have, a triple bypass surgery, you're not going to be asking about the price. You're just going to be getting it done because you need it to live, right? If some use case comes around where it's as important as living, like how I treat my fiber at my house, and I literally say it's more important than like running water to me, then people will find a way to pay.
So here's my argument to your statement there. Consumers in general are using more data every single year and have been for quite some time. And data usage has been growing exponentially on every network for years.
Yep.
And there's a disconnect with the customer and where they don't, because they've just been told unlimited, unlimited, unlimited. But in reality, every single person on this panel, every single person in this live stream is consistently using more data than ever before. And at some point, the carriers have to, they got to compensate for that heavy usage, and that's going to be with network upgrades.
And
network upgrades aren't cheap.
If that wasn't important, then you wouldn't have, to your point, for example, a bunch of AT&T customers who are upset because they still don't have 5G Plus on their phones. So it is important to the end user. The issue is that oftentimes the end user doesn't want to pay anything more for the increased service. That's why you have people who are upset about having to pay $5 more for a legacy plan or whatever the case may be. I mean, we're talking about $5 in exchange for 1.6 gigs on your smartphone. It's more than worth it.
So there's
By the way,
there's three
I have a
things.
comment.
Three things I want to quickly say. One, as far as the stat about data usage going up year over year, that is a running trend since the dawn of the internet.
Yes.
So that's just an irrefutable fact. However, the second point that I want to touch on that's really important here is that while consumer data usage continues to go up, the cost to provide that gigabyte has gone down year over year significantly as well. Like to provide a gigabyte of data today is literally fractions of a penny compared to what it was back in the dial-up days, right?
And why is Comcast raising their pricing? Why is Spectrum raising their pricing?
Hold. I had 3 points. So that's the second part. And the third part is going back to what I was saying about the end user like life experience piece, right? We live in a world now where unlimited data is the thing that is being sold. To try to turn back the clock and undo Pandora's box is very challenging. And more importantly, on the topic of the icon that B was mentioning, I guarantee you that if you were to throw up a 5G plus icon, no, a 6G plus icon, the consumer wouldn't know. You could be broadcasting band 13 LTE as long as it's getting like 10 meg. The consumer is not going to notice the difference. Most people that like if I talk to someone that's like literally like just like older, or not even older, just someone in my family that's like not a techie, they literally just treat the Wi-Fi and cellular is all the same to them. Does my TikTok load? Does my YouTube load? They don't care at all, like at all about the technology. Just do I have bars? Does it load? That's all they know. The icon means generally nothing. And the only reason why there's this emphasis on 5G plus or whatever is because of the marketing spend behind it, right? Because there's this like marketing around, you know, the quality or whatever. But like if no one talked about the funny little icon, no one would be any wiser to it or hip to it. Like they just know that 5G plus is supposed to be faster, but what that actually translates to as far as end experience, assuming that they have a plan that doesn't have some type of special restrictions or whatever, doesn't touch on anything. But Moose, you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
No, this year is going to be the year where we're going to see a lot more, networks utilize their home ISP to offload traffic. There's been a lot of talk. I have buddies at Frontier, I have buddies at Verizon, at HQ over there in Basking Ridge. Goddamn, I hate that place. Moved there 2 years. There are actually multiple years now ago. How many years? It's been 4 years. So why is that important? Because like we've been saying, right, that there's people out there, even my nephew, man, he did 130 gigs in 1 month. And I was like, Chris, what the hell are you doing? Are you never on Wi-Fi? And he literally told me he's never home. He was never home that month, like very rarely. And when he was home, he wasn't on his phone as much because he was just sleeping and then leaving. So very interesting. But if he has an opportunity to be at another person's house that has AT&T service, right, he would automatically connect to that ISP's modem. Now, that means, though, that you will have to increase significantly the modem speed coming in, right? Instead of 20% boost, you're probably going to give it another 30% boost, or not another, but another 10% boost, or 30 or 40% boost on top of what you're paying for just to support all of these potential users that you're going to be offloading with that modem. But I do anticipate that, a lot of people are going to take the model of Comcast, where Comcast is doing its best, right? Their offload rates are like close to 97% to the modem. So more to come.
Is that a capability that's already built into AT&T's modem, that BGW?
It's been trialed back in 2021, where you can connect to the SSID automatically, and you don't have to actually. It's like a separate SSID that would be broadcasted, right? The maximum,
okay.
Yeah, the maximum that it was 300 by 300 on both up and down. That's not actually that bad, right? As an offload.
For indoor, that's totally fine.
Oh yeah. For in an indoor situation, it'd be a separate channel of 5 gigahertz.
Yeah, it's a hidden SSID.
Yeah, exactly. So I know it's possible. It's been tested on the BGW 320. Now, a matter of the other part, which is how are you going to guarantee that the iPhone or Samsung phones or Pixel phones connect to it? It would be the same thing as like the passport that you go into like airports, right? It'd be exactly the same as that.
Or you just install a certificate on the device, like you see at
Yeah.
college campuses. But
That's true. Yeah.
I hope they can refine that a little bit, because places I go where AT&T has that, it's a really hit or miss, like handoff from the wireless network back onto those pass points. But as long as they can iron that out, I think it'll be fine.
Wi-Fi 7 will fix a lot of those problems.
Yeah.
I'm
We'll
really
see.
excited.
I'm moving to a place with AT&T fiber, so very excited for that.
Just wait till the fourth quarter. The next version of the BGW.
Hey, but EM, to touch on your point of the question that you were posing, why is Comcast or broaden it. Why is traditional wireline telco raising prices? I mean, there's a few factors. One, and this one should be obvious, because they can. Private companies are going to do whatever is in their best interest to continue to drive growth for their shareholders, and so that's one. But secondary reason, a lot of the increased costs. I mean, there's obviously the upfront initial investment in the things like DOCSIS 4 that's happening and these fiber build-outs and things like that. So, it's very expensive to do right now in this current market. But, a lot of these things are factored when they're doing these builds anyway, years in advance to these projects, especially for ones that require government bids. So I wouldn't say that's like the key biggest factor here, but instead, one of the bigger raising costs is just in the fact of like employees. Employees in the telco space have been seeing increased compensation and benefits, and you're seeing a lot of companies look to reduce their labor force because that's where a lot of the driving cost factor was stemming from, specifically and especially when it comes to customer support. That expense has been more expensive than people might realize to be able to provide like the 24/7 support that we were used to and having the US reps. That's why you're seeing a lot of companies push even more of their care teams into third-party outsourced vendors, not necessarily over in the Philippines, but just being handled by other call centers to incur those costs.
It's funny you mentioned that because we played a game last week. Me, B, Sneed, and Max. Build your own carrier, and then there were a bunch of different classifications for different portions of the company, and every single one of us rated customer service a 1, or we would spend the least amount of money possible in order to ensure network quality. And I find it very funny that everyone complains about customer service, but yet you throw a scenario in front of them where they want to build their own company, and that's the least amount they spend.
Can you do the? I missed that one. Can you do the real quick? Do the build a carrier to me real fast. What's the rules?
Max
No, we
made
don't-
it. It was
Yeah, we
really
don't have
it
the
was
game
really
anymore.
complicated. I'm sorry.
Darn.
Oh.
Well,
But it's funny that you mentioned that all these other companies are starting to see an increased cost in customer service and customer care, and that's the first place that they cut.
yeah,
It's expensive.
is the most. It generally speaking, and I know this is hard to believe, but generally speaking, customer service is the most expensive part of any business. Because it's inelastic as an expense. Like with the network, right? You can do things to opt. Like once you've made the investment in the network, and efficiencies are gained from technology improvements and stuff like that. Generally speaking, you can optimize that operational cost to maintain. But customer service is not really something you can do that with, right? It's inelastic in nature. As you grow, you will continue to have to add bodies to support your clientele and queues. Obviously, there's things like AI and self-service options that you can try to implement, and obviously, there's things that you can do on the product side to try to reduce contacts into care. But by the nature of this type of business, it's one of those expenses where you just kind of have to have it, and there's certain expectations around what needs to be had from a support standpoint. In fact, it's actually grown as time has gone on. Like back in the day, a simple phone call, inbound call center was all you really needed. Now you need people that are skilled with written skills, so you can do your social media, and different social media channels require different skill sets to be able to support and function properly. Like when you talk to your typical Twitter user, it's going to be a whole different experience than when you talk to, say, someone on Reddit, right? Just by the nature of those communities and those forums. And then you've got other aspects too now, especially with a lot of these immigrants that are coming in, where WhatsApp has become a channel that's been looked into by a lot of companies to support, because that's what a lot of these European or Latin American communities actually tend to leverage instead of their traditional traditional phones. So it gets very expensive very quickly.
Yep. But as that is due to the increased demand from the customer for increased bandwidth and reliability, which is coming with DOCSIS 4. That was my whole point. Is that
Yep.
the increased cost? I mean, Charter and Comcast are in very precarious situations right now. They're seeing broadband subs in the negatives, and they're spending billions of dollars in updating and modernizing their networks to compensate for the lack of reliability in their network as it exists now. And just like with the wireless carriers, it's all very, very expensive.
Can I just quickly touch though that I don't think technology is the key driving factor behind why Comcast or traditional cable telco is seeing what is occurring right now today, and to the point where if push came to shove, right, if someone put a gun to Brian Roberts' head and said this company is going to go under like in a month if you don't do something, I think they could probably solve a lot of their loss issues simply by just changing price. And by price, I mean get rid of the promotions, do like a static, like, $50 gets you 300 or I'm sorry, 400 meg by 100, which is what they're doing in the mid-split markets. And I guarantee you, no one would be really leaving. Like, generally speaking, price is the motivating factor, and specifically it's the explosive price increases, right? It's regularly talked about. I don't think anyone on this panel will argue with me or fight with me and say that the internet provided by your typical cable provider isn't fast enough to meet home needs. I mean, you've got literally over a gig down and at least 100 meg up as an option, if not 200, by a lot of these cable companies now. And that's not even like DOCSIS 4. That's just DOCSIS 3.1 with a mid split. Does that seem pretty fair? Or does anyone want to debate with me on that one?
Yeah, we can agree to disagree.
I mean, would you acknowledge that cable internet is generally sufficient for 99.9% of residential household use cases?
I'm not disagreeing with that fact. I'm saying that regardless of whether it is or it isn't, they're spending billions of dollars in upgrading and modernizing their network, and they're losing customers.
Yeah,
because they're playing a reactionary role to the fixed wireless craze rather than proactively making sure that their network was in a position to compete with increased competition.
Sure. I will say though that the reason why they're taking that approach though, instead of competing on price, is because similar to the Pandora's box analogy that we just touched on earlier with traditional wireless telco and the unlimited plans, once Comcast lowers the prices, it becomes very hard to undo that box, right? There is a certain number in people's heads of what they determine like a Comcast internet product should be as far as a price point. So that is the reason why they don't want to touch that and eat into their own ARPU. If they don't have to. If they think that the investment in the DOCSIS 4 lets them keep charging what they charge, then they'll do that. Which we'll see what happens with that. I don't necessarily think that it will change because we've seen that people are leaving fiber, which we all on this panel agree is kind of like the gold standard for fixed wireless, solely due to price. And if it's not due to price, it's due to some customer service interaction with the company.
Josh asks a good question. Do you think AT&T is going to do anything more to their plans other than add $1? I think that AT&T is going, personally, I think they're going to keep attacking the Elite plan because they don't want to keep paying for all of the HBO Max subscriptions that are still existing out there.
Funny you mentioned that because I've been personally getting directed emails from AT&T in regards to my Elite plan.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. They've been sending me emails trying to promote the new plan and everything, and they really want people off that plan. They're sick of paying for all the subscriptions.
Oh no, I literally got my first outbound phone call from AT&T. They treated it as like a checkup, but it was just a salesperson trying to pitch me on the new plan.
I don't even understand why they updated their plans, added minimal features, and then increased the prices by 99 cents.
Yeah, AT&T is going to have to pull Unlimited Elite from my cool dead hands, similar to the people that stuck around on their original unlimited plan until they literally neutered it to obscurity. I'm going to basically be holding out on Elite, not because I necessarily can't live without HBO Max. I mean, I did that for years in my life, but because there is literally zero value add from Premium or the new Premium Plus. Like Hotspot to me, I mean, I'm not saying Hotspot doesn't come in handy when like if my Fios goes out or something, but like extended durations where my Fios goes out are very rare ever since it's been like properly fixed. I mean, the most recent stint was because the installers cut my fiber line like idiots, which don't get me wrong, was pretty frustrating, but Verizon did more than an acceptable job, in my opinion, in handling that. They gave me a credit. They had someone out within 2 days, which was much better than what they used to do as far as timing. I was pretty satisfied, and the installer improved my setup for my house for future if this would happen again in the future. So, like,
That's good.
Hotspot is like 40 gigs of hotspot generally sufficient, and if I'm out of AT&T hotspot, I've got plenty of lines. T-Mobile's pretty solid at my house. I got 40 gigs with them, although they double count for some reason on that. And then I got the Verizon hotspot, although as you've seen at my home, Verizon's a little bit on the weaker side, at least for my particular house, which
A little rough.
we'll have to talk offline if you were able to hear anything on regards to that.
Really quick.
Yeah,
So
go
the
ahead.
Vision Pro is coming out. It's a big topic, and I know it's going to probably be in another podcast, but you know, we've been getting reports that there's probably going to be less than like 100,000 units for the entire US. I don't think it's going to like drastically change people's behaviors. However, I will say this. I do believe that whoever is testing it on the panel is going to be using a lot of data per month on their ISP at home, because unless you're going to get a backpack with a battery pack, I don't think you're going to be taking it outside for more than 2 hours.
Well, why would the Vision Pro have a significant increase in data consumption? Because from my understanding, it's still just doing what your phone does, right? Your media consumption, okay, 4K. My TV does that. Apps, like what exactly about the Vision Pro is going to be using more data than some other device, I guess?
I think in the best example I can give you is the Disney Plus app for the Apple TV 4K on the Vision Pro has additional things on there that may from the announcement video, right, the presentation, it seems like it will be utilizing additional data, right? Like there's backdrop scenes, there's possibly other things like from I don't know how else to say this, but like, you know how there's like an encyclopedia online for like shows and stuff like that, right? Gives you like details of the episode and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll have that additionally. Not too much. I'm not saying like it's going to be gigs and gigs and gigs, but you know, there could be, right, on the Disney Plus app, a VR experience of Disneyland or Disney World. Or I should say, sorry, it's not a VR experience, a spatial computing experience, because that's what I've been told by my contacts at Apple, is that this is not a VR headset, it's a spatial computing headset.
Yeah, it's more like HoloLens than a VR headset like the Vive. But side note, real
this is a good. It's a good. It'll be a good indicator for the amount of data usage that we will see from products like this in the future. But at that price point, I just don't see the adoption being there.
Oh, it absolutely won't be there. It'll be just like HoloLens. When HoloLens first came out, you will see literally, people that are on the bell curve that are like early tech adopters. You'll see a few of them pick it up. You might see a few companies or enterprises pick it up from a development standpoint, but I highly doubt it's going to be taking off into a mainstream, like an iPhone in every pocket kind of adoption.
Will
Not
it sell
until the
out?
cost comes down.
Will it sell out?
Depends on how many units Apple's producing, right? Like if there's only 50,000, then maybe. But if it's like, I don't know, 250,000 or something like that, I don't see Apple selling more than like 10,000 of those like per month.
If there's one company that could actually sell out their supply, it would be Apple.
Why? Well, why don't you see that?
Why don't I see it selling more than like 10K a month?
Yeah.
A few factors. One is that I doubt that we're going to see any type of like heavy promotional discounts to help bring down that cost from any of the traditional methods that people would procure. Okay. B, if you know something that I don't, that's huge.
No, I mean, it's the same theme that we've been talking about. To Ian's point, it's cost. People, are they going to want to pay? I mean, the answer generally is no. You got to help them pay for everything. You got to discount, you got to subsidize it, whatever, in order to get them to pay.
Well, there's three parts. So one is cost, and that's a really big one for this particular product. The second part here that is really, really important is that going back to experiencing use case, it's not very clear what that is, right? Like if we were to go open up our history textbooks and look at when like the first computers came out, right? Because this is what I would treat this as, like almost like a first computer, right? It was a new way at interacting with like tech. The adoption for the first computers was very small. Computers were very expensive, and they generally didn't do a lot, right? Like there was nothing like I don't know if you guys ever played around with like an OG computer, but like legit, like there was like basically nothing for it. Like it was just a tinker's dream, but like you couldn't really do anything on it. Nothing that was useful, right? It wasn't until a few computers in when you start getting software like Word existing that like computers started having a point of presence, and a lot of people became engaged with their first computers because of the schools and their businesses using them for work, and then they were like, oh yeah, personal computer in the house, right? I like it's the same thing with like this Apple VR headset, right? Like this first gen is like this first computer. There's not you talked about this Disney experience or whatever, right? Like I don't see someone buying this for their home just to do that. Maybe like a company comes up and they can like rent or use one in that way for funsies, but like to actually buy, I just think it's a first gen product at a very high price point. It's a test to market proof of concept kind of dealio. I don't think this is the particular mass adoption product for Apple. But I could be wrong, right? I mean, Apple had the iPad and the original iPhone, right? And those were pretty revolutionary, and those took off pretty well. So maybe I could be wrong. We'll see what happens. Also,
let's wrap it up.
Okay, one more thing before we do. Can we just agree that cable's not going to die? Like Blockbuster, they're going to exist as an internet provider of some form.
I can't say I agree with you there.
You don't think the cable telcos will exist as internet providers for the foreseeable future?
Not as cable providers.
Well, they might transition to fiber 20, 30 years down the line, but like the cable companies, they're going to exist, right? Like they're not going to go off the face of the earth like a block.
Steve said cable. I'm talking cable. DOCSIS. DOCSIS will eventually be replaced by fiber, 100%.
Sure, but yeah, I guess different interpretations of how we're reading this. I'm reading it as like he thinks the cable companies are going to die. But anywho, okay, yeah, we can wrap it up. Oh, I just read the message. Thank you everyone for coming on and watching Sneed's show. Thank you, panel, for having me on. This is the end of the show. You guys have a happy holiday tomorrow. Hopefully you guys have it off. Peace.